and welcome to the Do It Yourself Rescue Horse podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Cooper. Let's get started. Today, I want to talk more specifically about how to pick or choose a horse. Like, what are the basic things that you want to look for if you want to go pick up a horse at an auction? Now what? What are you going to choose? So, one of the most important things I think is temperament. That's definitely something that's crucial, because if you are looking for a family horse, you don't want a super reactive horse that's going to freak out at every little thing that happens. You want something that's calm and even-keeled, and you'll be able to sort of see that when you're at the auction, because you'll see, noise around them, other people around them, other horses around them. You can kind of see which ones are more spirited than others. So that's especially important, because you don't want to get something that you just can't deal with if you don't have any experience. The next thing that's really important is age. You don't want to really get a young horse like I did unless you are very patient, you have time and money to put into this, and you're willing to have help. Because it took me about 3 years until I really was able to ride Eli. I got him when he was 1.5, and I did all this groundwork with him, which was great, but some people just don't have the patience for that. They just want to ride right away. So if that's more like you, then you definitely should not be getting a young horse unless you want to send that horse out for training and someone can do all of the groundwork for you. But again, you won't have as much of a bond if you did all of the work yourself. Now, if you want an older horse, they're definitely usually a lot calmer. Although one of my horses is kind of the exception. I got him when he was 4. He is now 8, and he is so calm, and all I had to do was work on picking up his right lead canter, and that was it. He could tote beginners around basically from day one, and I use him to teach lessons now, and he's a great trail horse. But that's not very common. Even when I was growing up and we were looking for our first horse or even our second horse, we were looking for something in the 10 years on up range. Now, you don't want to really be getting a horse that's like 20 years old unless you really know, okay, this horse is kind of getting older. I'm going to do light riding and then I'll just retire the horse. That's fine, but if you want to do more riding, trails, shows, lessons, clinics, whatever, if you want this horse to be a riding horse, you're going to want something in the teen range, because that horse has experience and has done things and seen things and been ridden, but isn't quite on their way out, we'll say, for a lack of a better term. They are in general harder to retrain to new disciplines. Our horse, Rusty, our very first horse, he's now 31 actually now. He's going to be with us forever, I think. But we got him when he was 14, and at that point he had been a barrel horse out in Missouri and moved to the East Coast and was used as a trail horse for about a year or two. And then we got him, and he was our first horse. And we didn't really ride Western, but he came with, the Western curb bit. He neck reined, he had his Western saddle, and we were English riders. And we just decided we're just going to make him an English horse. Needless to say, you don't just want to stick a snaffle bit into a horse's mouth who's known a curb all their life. He definitely didn't know what to do, and he took off with me in an open field, and I was 12, and I was pulling back as hard as I could on that snaffle bit, but he was not used to it, and it took a while. He does do English now, but he still definitely, well, he's retired now, but he did do English, and I did do some lower level dressage with him, but he definitely preferred Western. So sometimes you'll find that like they've done that their whole life pretty much, so it'll be kind of difficult to train that. Even my horse Finn, I don't know what his history was. He came from an auction before the auction that I got him from, and I ride him English, but he really has a hard time with contact. He really likes contact, but not if you're using it to steer him. You really have to steer with your body. And he's been a project for 4 years now. Granted, consistency is key, and he didn't have the most consistency, but needless to say, I got him when he was 9, so it was a little bit more difficult. And it's funny, you'll see the parallel because my mom has a younger horse, and she didn't have anything, just like Eli was, and she's progressing a lot faster because she doesn't have any bad habits that need to be undone in their training. So history under their belt is good and bad. So you just want to take that into account. Now, size is the next thing. You don't want to get a horse that is too big or too small. I am more of a petite rider, so I can deal with like the 14 two-hand, large ponies. I have had a 13-hand pony before. I'm not really a pony person, personally, because I've had a bad experience with ponies. But I'm not going to just go out there and get like a 17-hand horse either, because that's way too big. Now, if you're stockier, you're not going to want to ride like a tiny pony. You're going to want something. Or if you're taller, you're going to want a taller horse. You don't want your legs hanging down underneath the horse's belly. Or if you're getting a horse for your kid, same thing. You're going to want something smaller and more manageable for them to ride. Now, body type is the next thing. There's different builds for different disciplines. So, for example, if they're built uphill, meaning their hind end is a little bit lower and their withers up by their like head and neck area they're higher, so that when they move, or especially if they canter, they're built to kind of sit and lift up their front end for disciplines like dressage or jumping. Whereas, although I'd have to remember my learning in college, I remember learning for Western, if you're working on the ranch all day and you're herding cows, you want something that's actually built a little bit more downhill because of sitting around, like the horse is standing around the field, then you move, and then you stand, and then you move. But I would have to consult my my friend who is my Western expert on that one to double check. But basically, that's my point. If you have a stocky horse, that's good for carrying. So if you say you're a larger person and you don't want to have a large horse, you could get something that's on the shorter end, like 15 hands, but the horse could be stockier and able to carry. So that's one of the best things about my one horse Halligan, that young horse I was talking about. He is 15 hands, so he is right in that middle area where he's a little bit big for kids and a little bit small for adults, but doable. But he's also really stocky. He's got some quarter horse in him, so he can carry the larger adults who don't really want to be too far off the ground, which is really great. And then if they're more lean, they're more suited to being more agile and jumping and running across the country and trail riding and all that stuff. Although stocky horses are good for trail too. But when I do trails, it's more of an epic cross-country course for me. I always try to find those down trees to jump over, so... Another thing to consider would be conformation, which kind of ties into what their body build is, but it's more specific to like proportions and angles of how they're built. So, for example, toed in, toed out, are they short-backed, are they long-backed? You really want to make sure you know what you're looking at, because you don't want to get a horse that has very terrible conformation, because that's going to affect how they move, and it's going to affect how they could be lame or have other injuries further down the road. So like pigeon-toed, which is another name for toed in, where their knees are offset and their toes are literally point in, that could lead to splints. Short-backed will have shorter, choppier movement. long-backed will have longer movement, but they could clip their front feet with their hind feet. They may need bell boots on their front legs to protect them. You really want to see how the horse moves too. You don't just want to look at the picture and say, oh yeah, that horse is going to have this issue, because you want to double check how they move, how they carry themselves. The angle of the pastern is crucial too. That's, for those who aren't familiar, like that is above their hoof. It's between their hoof and like their ankle. It's that angle line. If the pastern is too upright or if it's too low, they will definitely be more prone to injuries. And hind legs, they have similar things too. You want everything to have proper angles and line up well under the horse and have good proportions. I guess I'll just have to do a podcast just on this topic alone, because there really is a lot involved, and you want to make sure you know what you're looking at when you're judging a horse based on their conformation. Another thing to consider is, what is their training? How are they going when they're riding through the auction? Are they being ridden through by a young rider, an older rider? Are they being ridden through just at the walk? Or are they being led through? Are they not even being ridden through at all? Are they not broke to ride? Are they just trotting? Or are they just cantering? Sometimes at the auction that I used to go to a lot more frequently, they would actually just hold a pole out in this tiny area and make the horse jump it. Are they able to do that? Or also at the same place, before the horse auction started, they would be auctioning off tack. So you can look around at the horses, and they had a riding arena where you could watch some of their employees ride the horses to see how they move and what they can do. That will tell you a lot. Are they able to pick up both leads as they canter? Are they able to, are they running around with their head in the air? Are they able to trot? Are they lame? Sometimes they're lame. So you definitely want to go there ahead of time and see what they're doing. Are they being ridden through Western? Or are they being ridden through English? How are they being steered? Are they being steered with one hand, which is more towards Western riding or neck reining? All of these things will give you kind of clues about what's the deal with this horse. Now, granted, a lot of times at the auctions, they won't really have the proper fitting tack or the properly fitted bridle or a bit that horse isn't used to. So these horses are being put through a lot because they're being asked to do things that they're not really used to doing in tack and equipment and with a rider that they're not used to. So they may be going through Western, but really they know English, or vice versa. So keep that in mind too. There's a lot of question marks. I know, it's confusing. Gender, that's pretty important too. If you're going to buy a colt, for example, like I did, you will have to consider, well, actually he was a yearling, but you will have to consider a few $100s on top of their expense of buying them to get them gelded. Mares versus geldings. Are you going to board them somewhere where they don't want mares or where they don't want geldings? Or are you more used to mares? Are you more used to geldings? Are you adding one into your herd? How would that change your herd at home? You may have a herd of horses at home already that's all geldings. And if you go and pick up a mare, that's definitely going to change the dynamics of your herd. So really consider all of these things. And then lastly, the color, which that's not very important at all, but it's kind of a nice bonus. It's always the last thing that you want to think about when you're looking for a horse, whether it's an auction horse or if you're buying the conventional way. And, you want to also consider price too. If you're bidding, that's going to be a little bit different. I personally don't bid because I'm not good at that. I'm very introverted and I get anxious with all that stuff. So I will always purchase them from the number 10 pen after the fact. But if you want to go that route too, that's fine. I just personally can't bid in an auction. But you want to make sure you're not overpricing yourself out of it too. If you have a limited budget, you don't want to spend so much on the horse that you can't afford to pay for the care of the horse. I've seen that so many times that they just will want to save a horse, but then they don't have enough money for the upkeep of the horse, and the horse actually ends up suffering because, you saved them, which is good, but then you can't take care of them. So you don't want to overdo it too. You don't want to just buy and save like 10 horses each year, because they're not going to get the attention they deserve. If you're doing this by yourself, that's a lot. I mean, back in 2016, I pulled both Halligan and Finn, the two I was talking about earlier, and luckily it was spaced out, so Halligan I got in May, and Finn I got in October, but it was kind of a lot, and that's why I haven't really gotten any since, because I didn't have the time or finances to do so. So you want to make sure that you have enough money to financially take care of them. Now, traditionally, the more conventional route, you would start with price first, because that's definitely what's going to dictate what you can afford. Obviously, you don't want to be looking at something that you can't afford, but auctions tend to be cheaper. It depends on the economy. Again, when I got Eli, that was back in 2009, and that's when the economy was really causing horse prices to be very low. So what I paid $80 for him. More recently, like back in 2016, when I got Halligan and Finn, the same Eli, if Eli was there that year, he probably would have cost me $500 or $300 to $500, somewhere in that range. So it definitely can vary, and I definitely suggest you just go a couple of times and see what is the going rate for which horse. This horse goes for this much. Maybe it's because they can jump. Maybe it's because of their color. I don't know, but, see what you're looking for and see what that goes for, and see if it's something that's realistic for you. When I got Halligan from the auction, I went with the intention of getting a lesson horse, and I had some money set aside to do that. And at this time, the auction was actually taking pictures of the horses and posting them a couple of days before the auction, probably just to draw people in to see what was there and what was available. So what I did was I went through and I was like, okay, I know I want a gelding, so I only looked at the gelding ones. Then I looked at their conformation in the pictures. I eliminated all of the ones that had poor conformation, that I didn't want to deal with having to pay huge medical bills or for supplements to fix certain things or proper shoeing to fix certain things. I just wanted an easy keeper and one that didn't have conformation issues. Then I also looked at the size. Anything that was too large or too small, I didn't want. So Halligan was still in, I think I had probably about 10 horses, 10, it's by number, 10 numbers of the horses that fit that criteria, and also the age too. I said that backwards, but the age was also really important. I didn't want something too old, but I didn't want something too young, and he was kind of on the younger end for sure. I definitely would not suggest going and buying a 4-year-old horse if you're intending it for a child's horse until you really go and see the horse. Typically, they're not quite mature enough yet. So he was in my list, but I wasn't quite sure. There was one that I liked a lot more. And then I went there and I had my list of the 10 numbers of the horses that I wanted to look at, and I went to each horse. I walked up to them, I pet them, I picked up all 4 of their feet to make sure that they would be responsive enough to do that. They didn't have any issues with me handling them. Because let's be honest, you don't want a horse that has an issue picking up their feet. I've dealt with it. It's a pain. And then I watched them ride through. Now, Halligan was not ridden in the arena, but he was ridden through. He was ridden through at the walk only. And I was like, that's kind of weird. And then I remembered back when I was handling him, he didn't want to pick up his left hind leg. He just did not want to do it. And there was a little bit of heat in that leg. and I saw that there was like a cut on his leg because they had put shoes with studs on it and he had cut himself. So luckily that's all that happened, but that was definitely a red flag. But the horse that I had picked originally was like super psycho and crazy, and they were taking him out to the arena to ride him, and he was like rearing up and like freaking out. And I'm like, well, that's definitely not a good lesson horse, but he looked so great from the picture. So, you really want to make sure you investigate in person because this is a big commitment, and you don't want to get a horse that's going to be crazy. Now, Halligan technically did not fit all my criteria because he would not pick up his left hind, and he was only ridden through at the walk, which meant to me he was lame at the trot. That could have meant something a lot worse. That could have meant that he had a serious lameness that I needed to be concerned about. Luckily, it just was that he had cut himself with his shoe like that day, and he was a little sore. But I ended up, after the auction, because he went to the number 10 pen, I went out to the pen where the horses were, and I was like, let me just see if he's actually lame at the trot. Because let's be honest, like, I don't mind if he doesn't canter. I just need to know that he can do a walk trot and that he's not seriously lame. So I trotted him out on the lead, and he was fine. He wasn't lame at the trot. I was just concerned that he would have been lame because I remember feeling heat in that leg, and I kind of wrote him off. But I gave him a second chance, and luckily I did. And it's kind of funny because typically with my other horses, I've like gone back and contacted the office after the fact, but the owner of the auction at the time was actually walking out to the pen with another customer, and I walked up to him with the horse and was like, how much for this horse? And he actually told me $600, which was what he sold to the number 10 pen for. And so I didn't have to pay anything extra. I think I just caught him off guard. And so I was like, super, this is great. And we picked him up the next day. Yeah, the next day. We picked him up the next day, and he has been such a great horse for our family, and he's taught lots of lessons, and he's such a good trooper. So that's kind of the process that you want to go through. Now, it might be different now. I know a lot of times now they'll actually post videos ahead of time. So that's really helpful because you can see the horse go. But again, you don't know if they've edited the video, if they've cut things out. It's always better to just go in person and see the horse, pet the horse, kind of get a feel for what's the horse's personality. Because you don't want a horse that's grouchy all the time or just burnt out. Again, like I'll discuss this later, but if they are grouchy or things like that, there's ways to manage it, and you always want to rule out something physical first. So you definitely want to get them vetted as soon as you get home when they're settled in their quarantine area. You want to get them vetted, and you want to eliminate any things that will cause them pain, because a lot of times when they act up, it's out of pain. And then once you eliminate that pain, then you can go in with the behavior and fix it with training. But that's definitely the route you want to go. And also with my guys, I mean, with the exception of Eli and my mom's horse, we've always pulled their shoes off. They've always come with shoes, and they don't need shoes. For some reason, they think that putting shoes on horses will make them seem like they're worth more or they're fancier or something. But when I see a horse with shoes on, I'm like, well, I hope this doesn't mean that I'm going to have to keep paying for them to have shoes, because let's be honest, trimming a horse's hooves is a lot cheaper than having to shoe them all the time. I want something that's low maintenance, not high maintenance. So anyway, that's just the general overview. And I'll go more in depth of, what's the next step? What about quarantine? What about, what do you need when you get this horse? Where's this horse going to go? Tack, equipment, feed, everything. You want to make sure you're as prepared as possible and hopefully I can help you out with my experiences. I know for me personally, I remember things a lot better when there's a story attached. So that's sort of why I give these little examples here and there, because I only have to go through it once, maybe twice, to learn my to learn my lesson. I mean, ever since this whole thing happened, like I talked about in the previous episodes, I haven't bought a horse through conventional methods because I was cheap. I mean, let's be honest, I wasn't going to want to pay a ton of money. I didn't have the money to buy through conventional methods. I couldn't drop $1,000 or more on a horse. So I was cheap, and also I've had horses drugged or sold to me that were not what they said they were. I've been taken advantage of through the natural methods. So if I'm going to be taken advantage of or have to be very critical or skeptical going into purchasing a horse, regardless of if it's at an auction or if it's through conventional methods of buying from a private seller, knowing that I'm going to have to work with, and also I'm sort of helping the horse out in a way, because let's be honest, they don't want to be in the number 10 pen. You don't want them going where they are destined to be going. So it's been a really fun thing, and I really like having to figure the horse out and bonding with the horse, whether it's my own horses or horses that clients have paid me to work with. It's always been really interesting trying to figure the horse out and trying to figure out their background. So next episode, I will talk more specifically about conformation, and I highly suggest just Googling horse leg conformation, because you'll get some good pictures of what I'm talking about, because again, this is a podcast. You're only listening to my voice. I'm a visual learner, so I need to see things to kind of understand what it is I'm looking for. And hopefully that will help you get an idea of what to look for and what to avoid, because you don't want to get a horse that you're going to have to spend a ton of money trying to maintain if that's not something that you are in a spot to do. I mean, if you have a ton of money and you just want to save horses and you have all this money to blow on their medical expenses, go for it. I've never been able to do that, so I have to be really discerning with what I can and can't do. So next time we'll talk about conformation, and I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you for listening. Bye. If you're really enjoying this podcast, please like it, share it, review it, get people to find it, and that will help me keep doing this because I really love it, and I hope you guys love it too. Thank you.